Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another St. Louis podcast episode. My name is Eric Brown, president at Vi Media, partner at Mogul Holdings. Today, we have some great news, some bad news, some interesting news, and a lot of things to talk about. Of course, as always, this is the St. Louis podcast. Each and every Friday, we drop an episode, so thank you for tuning in. And shout out to our biggest sponsors, Half Coast Studios here, the room that we're sitting in right now, and of course, Vi Media, digital marketing company here in St. Louis. And first thing on the docket, Amazon and White House crosshairs over report of displaying tariff costs. I know this has been all over the news. I'm sure you don't want another person to talk about it, but here we are. Amazon said on Tuesday its low-cost haul unit. Now, let's keep that in mind. Low-cost haul unit had considered listing import charges for goods in light of new U.S. tariffs, but denied looking at such a plan for its main website after the White House accused it of a hostile political act. The Seattle retailer spent a chaotic morning denying a report from Punchbowl News that it planned to display prices showing tariffs impact on Amazon.com. It acknowledged that it had considered for certain inexpensive China-made products on haul, but then rejected the idea. The confusion initially prompted a 2% drop in Amazon shares. There we go. How much did that lose Jeff Bezos off the top? After White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called the reported pricing plan a hostile and political act by Amazon. The company said its smaller haul division, which competes for low-cost buyers with Temu and Shein, had mulled displaying import levies. The team that runs our ultra-low-cost Amazon haul store considered the idea of listing import charges on certain products. This was never improved and is not going to happen, a company spokesperson said, adding that teams discuss ideas all the time. And then, of course, Trump said, Jeff Bezos is very nice. He solved the problem very quickly. He did the right thing. So I'm going to take the opposite approach here. Maybe not the opposite approach, but I'm going to take an approach here. Why would, hypothetically, displaying tariff costs on Amazon even be a bad thing, considering we were told from the get-go, essentially, that the tariff situation, that this is not going to be a tax on U.S. taxpayers, U.S. citizens. But it seems like what tariffs are doing, for the most part, as it stands right now, is just making goods more expensive for U.S. citizens. Now, with the low, long haul, whatever this is, the cheaper items like from Shein and Temu, I've gone on the podcast here and ripped those companies to shreds to begin with. I don't think people should be going on Temu and Shein and buying $3, $5 things that you wear once or twice and promptly throw it away because you only wear it once or twice, or because it literally becomes unwearable after one or two times. Our consumer culture is out of control. I've talked about our ongoing consumer debt problem, credit card debt problem that we've talked about. That continues to grow. And maybe there's something to say about this affecting consumerism on an American level, and that maybe people are starting to realize that they have an issue. But I want to go back to saying this is a hostile and political act by Amazon. First of all, this was never going to be on Amazon's main website, like they said. This was only for the low-cost haul units, which again are competing with like Shein and Temu. They were only going to show it there, potentially. As they say, it was an idea, but the idea sounds like it was going to come to fruition. And of course, we got our White House stepping in and making it, going to make it tough on Amazon if they continue to do so. So of course they didn't. But what's the problem with showing the tariff costs, right? What's the problem? Because as a consumer, it'd be nice to know that a cost that we didn't have before that we now do, based on actions that have been made over the past, 60 to 90 days, or what has it been? 30 days now. So I don't know how I feel about this. I feel like them going out and saying it's a hostile political act by Amazon, hostile act. It's just like, what? Because they're showing tariff prices and you want to, it seems like what the Republican Party wants to just, keep a blindfold over everyone's eyes and be like, this isn't actually affecting you. This isn't making things more expensive, which of course, of course it is. So who knows where the cookie will crumble there. Um, in light of that, and in news of that, Sheen, Temu prices spike as much as 300% due to U.S. tariffs. Chinese e-commerce giants Shein and Temu are raising prices for U.S. shoppers following newly imposed tariffs on Chinese imports. Beginning May 2nd, so what, 1 or 2 days from now, imports from China valued under $800, once exempt under the de minimis rule, are now subject to a tax amounting to 120% of the product's value or a minimum of $100 per shipment. So this was one of the ways actually that China was able to essentially drop ship and send this stuff over at so little cost is because for some reason on a lot of these products that have a very, very low value, we never charged them anything for it. And going back to what I just said a couple minutes ago about consumerism, maybe there is something to be said about a potentially good thing that could come out of this. But I mainly am seeing negatives currently. But the U.S. consumers and citizens, for the most part, do have a consumerism problem, and that is, it doesn't take a genius to see that. Just talk to, I'm sure, one of your friends, or look at one of your parents or family members, and you'll be like, "Yep, absolutely, that is 100% the case." So both Temu and Shein have started passing these new import costs on to consumers. A review of 14 top selling Temu products shows that in many cases, the new taxes now surpass the value of the products themselves, more than doubling their overall price. At the same time, Shein has significantly raised prices for U.S. buyers, with some items seeing hikes of over 300%. Are any items still unaffected? Products already stored in U.S. warehouses are still exempt from the new tariffs, meaning their prices remain stable for now. To prepare for tariff changes, Temu had previously encouraged its suppliers to send goods in bulk to U.S. warehouses under a half custody approach. So, as existing warehouse inventory runs low and new shipments come in under the high tax rates, wider price increases are expected. The new tariffs arise amid growing tensions in U.S. trade relations and could have a major impact on American online shopping behaviors in the future. Look at that. A major impact on American shopping behaviors in the future. It's like I should be a journalist or something. But that's 100% the case. And hopefully, I like I said, I think the one thing that could potentially come out of it is just the simple fact of people hopefully start to realize what they're buying and what they're spending their money on. Because it used to be very easy, right? That's why the one like Timu was almost a game, right? With like the different, percentage offs, wheels, stuff like that. It was like a roulette essentially on items, and they'd be like, "Oh, $4, $8. Oh my God, this is such a good deal." When in reality, a lot of the products are garbage, of course, number one. Um, and number two, there are a lot better products to be bought that will actually last a lot longer and are built to actually use, wear, etc. Even if that's not from an American manufacturer, right? There are other countries as well, of course, that produce those materials. Now, the biggest thing is the products and materials that are made essentially only in China, right? That's the biggest thing, and I know they've been doing things to essentially allow a longer time for these companies to be able to do some of that stuff here in the U.S. But how long is that going to take? Number one, number two, obviously, Trump's only going to be here for 3 more years, 3.5 more years. What happens after that? Does everything just go back to the way it was? So there, there's a lot of questions, right? And then, of course, on top of all of this, we have China vows to stay firm, urges nations to resist Trump. Chinese Foreign Minister Yi said appeasement will only embolden Trump at a BRICS meeting, rallying the group of emerging market nations to fight back against U.S. levies. China's top diplomat warned countries against caving into U.S. tariff threats as the Trump administration hints at the possible use of new trade tools to pressure Beijing. Chinese Foreign Minister Yi said appeasement will only embody Trump at BRICS meeting, rallying the group of emerging market nations to fight back against U.S. levies. China should not be an emerging market nation. And there is something to be said about letting them into the WTO as an emerging nation. I believe all the way back in the 90s or I think it was the 90s or early 2000s, and them continuing to have that status, right? And that status gives them a lot more leniency in what they're able to do versus a country like the US. So we're already putting ourselves at a disadvantage by labeling them as such. The stern remarks showed China intends to resist pressure to enter trade talks, even as U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, suggests Washington could ban certain exports to China to gain leverage. Wang's call to the international community underscores China's attempt to portray itself as the bastion of free trade, as U.S. tariffs threaten to reshape commerce globally. Beijing has repeatedly urged allies to defend multilateralism, and told other governments not to cut deals with the U.S. president at China's expense. China has repeatedly denied being engaged in trade talks with the U.S. Instead, Beijing has demanded mutual respect and a cancellation of all tariffs before any negotiations. So we're in a battle. And I don't know who to believe. Is he negotiating? Are they negotiating? Who's lying to us? Is this all just a game by both sides? Who the hell's winning? What's going on? And it seems like at this point, specifically with China, no one knows. No one knows. So, in other news, Republicans unveil proposal for 150 billion in new Pentagon spending. Yeah. Just what we need when our interstate highways in St. Louis are literally falling apart with potholes everywhere. We need to spend 150 billion in new Pentagon spending. And I think that'll take it to over a trillion. Yeah. The added dollars will bring defense spending to more than 1 trillion for the first time in US history. Wonderful. I wonder what does the average person in the US pay in federal taxes? I don't need the percentage. I need the amount. Why is this so hard to find out? I guess I could do total tax revenue divided by the population, right? Be an easy way. Let's see. What on average? Looking for the dollar amount. Okay, here we go. In 2022, the average family in the middle 20% of income earners paid 18,000. 2021. Okay, so average according to National Priorities Project. All right, let's just take this 13,000. It looks to be right around there. 2021 estimate from the Tax Foundation notes typical earner paid $14,000 in federal income taxes. All right, let's look it up. Population of the United States. We still 340 bill. I think you get the point. I think you get the point. 340 million people divided by, let's just say the 13,500. It's a lot of our money.
Hey there, St. Louis podcast listeners. We've got some exciting news from our friends over at Farmers Insurance of St. Louis, led by the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Lee of Farmers Insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for a job or to own your own business under a brand that everyone and their cousin is familiar with, Mark Lee with Farmers Insurance of St. Louis is recruiting insurance agency owners here in St. Louis for their Farmers Insurance Mentorship Program.
And as many of you are aware, Garrett and I have owned quite a few successful and award-winning businesses over the years. And in a past life, one of those was a farmers insurance agency out of Chesterfield, Missouri.
Eric and I know firsthand how hard it is to start a business under a brand that no one has heard of and convince consumers and businesses to trust that you're an authority figure in your industry.
And as many of you know, we own an award-winning marketing firm, Vi Media, the one that Garrett was just discussing. And building that company's reputation literally took years. We're still building it to this day, and it's been 8 years in the making. However, with the Trusted Farmers Insurance Agency name on the building, we got started when we started our Farmers Insurance Agency. The trust was already built and has been for 96 years.
And if you can't do math, that means Farmers Insurance has been around since 1928. Luckily, you don't need to be a human calculator to get rich as an owner of your very own Farmers Insurance Agency.
Nope. All you have to do is reach out to the one and only Mark Lee, the leader of Farmers Insurance in the greater St. Louis metropolitan area.
That's right. So ensure he continues to sponsor our show and your favorite podcast, the St. Louis Podcast, by quitting your job today and calling Mark Lee. I wouldn't even wait for him to answer your call. Call your boss now, quit, and become your very own business owner.
Visit insurancecareerstl.com. That is insurancecareerstl.com. Should we spell it out?
Yes. It would
INSURANCE, career, CAREER, STL.com, insurancecareerstl.com. Go there now. Back to the podcast.
And wait, insurancecareerstl.com.
Back to the podcast. So House Republicans released legislation Sunday that would increase Pentagon. You'd think I'd be able to do basic math right now, and it's been a long day. House Republicans released legislation Sunday that would increase Pentagon spending by $150 billion, pushing the total defense budget for fiscal 2025 to more than $1 trillion if passed. Let's start. Who here in St. Louis, or just reach out to me if you want to start an arms company or some. Let's compete against Lockheed Martin or one of these companies. Let's start making some bullets, selling some guns, because this is insane. The bill developed by the House and Senate Armed Services Committees, of course, includes nearly $25 billion earmarked for Trump's long-discussed Golden Dome, missile defense initiative, a shield intended to protect the entire continent. Of course, the United States, continental United States against advanced missiles. When combined with the already approved $886 billion, the added dollars would bring, like I said, defense spending to more than $1 trillion for the first time in U.S. history. Republicans are pushing for $150 billion in funding boost as part of the party's sprawling package, full of Trump's domestic policy priorities. Republicans are planning to use the budget reconciliation process to pass the bill, which allows the party to circumvent Democratic opposition in the Senate. I mean, I don't see why Democrats would be opposed. Both parties love to spend money on the military. Both parties are backed by military spending. Both parties want war. So I don't think many, at the end of the day, people in Congress or people in Senate are going to be against this because they are funded by these companies that are going to get contracts for $1 trillion, right? Obviously, it goes to employees and things like that, but you get the point. $1 trillion. That's insane in 1 year. Um, the House Armed Services Committee is scheduled to consider the legislation and hold a vote on advancing it, a gathering known as markup, Tuesday at 10 a.m. Wonder how that went because I thought I looked at this. Regardless, let's keep going. Will then be the panel's language will then be combined with different portions from other panels to create the party's budget reconciliation bill. House Armed Service Committee Chair Mike Rogers called the defense portion of the reconciliation bill a historic investment. Yeah, because it's so much damn money to restore U.S. military capabilities and strengthen national defense. You would think that with all of the money that we spend on the military already, that there is enough budget to do what you need to do. Seeing these absolute massive numbers, it just infuriates me. So I don't know why I didn't just do this earlier, but here, so we're looking at 1 trillion, right? 1 trillion. So that's, I think we're at a trillion. Let's see here. Trusty calculator. All right, so that's 1 trillion divided by 340 million. So on average, we are each paying almost $2,941. Almost $3,000 on average. And of course, not everyone pays taxes, but let's just, we're not going to get into that number. So it's even more. It's even more, right? Because there's a lot of people that don't make a lot of money. There's also a lot of people that just don't work, that don't have to pay taxes. So we're spending even more money than $3,000 a person for military spending. Let that sink in. Think about it. Don't attack me because I'm feeling to take some sort of stand that makes a lot of sense. But, there are people that are obviously going to benefit from that spending. Our defense industrial base has weakened. America's deterrence is failing. And without a generational investment in our national defense, we will lose the ability to defeat our adversaries, Rogers said. Maybe we should stop making adversaries. Maybe we should stop funding people in other countries, trying to overthrow governments, establish our own regimes, and then it not working out. Maybe we should stop doing that. Senate Armed Service Committee Chair Roger Wickers, meanwhile, said the bill is a generational upgrade in military capability. This is about building the future of American defense, achieving peace through strength, and ultimately deterring war. So the inclusion of the $150 billion defense funding boost puts to bed one of the disagreements between the House and the Senate. When it comes to the budget reconciliation bill, the budget resolution, which directs panels how to write their portions of the package, directed the Armed Services Committee to appropriate $100 billion to increase defense spending, while the Senate Armed Services Committee was mandated to funnel $150 billion. In the end, the Senate won out with the panel's language, including the $150 billion figure. It's crazy. Smith said that the bill includes $8.5 billion in spending that would support quality of life programs for service members. Okay, how about just that part? How about for service members and also veterans and things like that? Maybe you should put some more money there. As well as needed weapons modernization, such as investment should be considered through the normal authorization and appropriations process. The bill will be paid for by devastating cuts that can only come from critical programs like Medicaid, the SNAP program, student loan, and grant programs of the Department of Education, Smith said in a statement Tuesday Sunday. And to add insult to injury, this will be part of a legislation package that provides 4.5 trillion in tax cuts for the wealthy, but does nothing to lower middle class families. Now, obviously, that's his opinion, because I don't think any of that has actually come true yet. But regardless, Golden Dome, it sounds nice. I would like to have, some sort of defense. If another country launches a rocket at us, that we can have something to shoot it down. But also, our border is absolutely massive. I can see why it takes so much money, and maybe there's a better way to do it. I don't know. Um, Bill also includes 33.7 billion for shipbuilding, 20 billion for munitions, 13.5 billion for innovation. Give me some of that. I'll come in there and innovate. 12.9 billion for nuclear deterrence, 11.5 billion for military readiness, 11.1 billion for Pacific deterrence, 7.2 billion for aircraft, 5 billion for border security, 4.5 billion for the B-21, 2 billion for military intelligence, and 380 million for the Pentagon's annual audit. We spent 380 million on an audit. What? The more I read, the more I just think, what the hell is going on? A lot of money, a lot of our money being spent on stuff that God only knows if it really is going to, positively impact our life. Which that's how a majority of our money, I think, should be spent is, empowering us and other people's lives in the U.S. with providing necessary services. $1 trillion to military is insane. It's absolutely insane. Few other things I wanted to gloss over just real quick, because we haven't talked about Boeing in forever. I meant to bring this up when we were talking about tariffs. Boeing CEO says China not accepting planes over U.S. tariffs. Boeing CEO confirmed Wednesday that China has stopped accepting new aircraft due to the U.S.-China trade war, as the company's shares surged following a smaller than expected loss. In a television interview with CNBC, Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg said Chinese customers had stopped taking delivery to aircraft due to tariff environment, adding that if the halt continued, the aviation giant would soon market the jets to other carriers. President Donald Trump's trade conflicts with China and other countries loom as a question mark for Boeing, of course, a major U.S. exporter, despite Wednesday's solid results. Boeing had planned to deliver around 50 aircraft to China in 2025, adding that the company wouldn't wait long to send the jets to other customers. I'm not going to let this derail the recovery of our company, so we'll give the customers an opportunity if they want to take the planes, Ortberg said. That's what we prefer to do, but if not, we're going to remarket those airplanes. So Boeing's like, hey, if you don't buy them, we'll sell them to someone else. Fair enough. I mean, makes sense. This is just creating issues now for U.S. businesses as well from an export standpoint, right? Because how this was all presented is, hey, we have, it's so many of these countries export things, but they don't import a lot. Well, that goes back to number one, the U.S. I believe our GDP is higher than almost every other country, and of course, we spend pretty much more than every country as well per person on stuff that would be on Amazon or similar businesses, right? Um, and now we have Boeing, who exports planes, which we want, right? Thumbs up for exports that are now not being able to be exported to China. So it's like it's a double middle finger to the U.S. The aviation giant reported a loss of 123 million in the first quarter, smaller than the projected $343 million loss in the year ago period. Revenues rose 18% to 19.5 billion. In its earning release, Boeing confirmed targets to raise commercial plane production as it bolsters its safety efforts following deadly crashes and other major incidents. The company reaffirmed the production of its 737 MAX, will hit 38 per month in 2025, while output of the 787 Dreamliner will climb to 7 per month from 5 per month. I don't know if we haven't had really any aviation incidents that I've seen recently, which is great news. So that's awesome. Um, we want Boeing to do well. It's very easy to rip on them because they've been doing a lot of shady shit and not building planes appropriately and not, and not making sure their contractors are working appropriately and, the, the FFA or the FAA, excuse me, not doing their job because the FAA relied on Boeing to inspect a lot of their own planes themselves, which is crazy. It's absolutely insane. So Boeing's taking a hit. And we got last thing, Apple sued for false advertising of iPhone 16's AI capabilities. Yeah. Who even uses that? I think I have the AI button, right? I don't even know how to. I guess I don't. I think I have the one from like last year, 2 years ago. Who even knows what iPhone you have anymore? That's how non-relevant and non-important it is. All I know is I have an iPhone with USB-C, which I required, and that's and that's it. No one knows what iPhone do you have. Someone's like, yeah. Obviously, if you have the new one, you're like, yeah, I got the new one. Other than that, usually you're like, I don't know. What are we even on now? The iPhone 18, 16, right? We're on the 16. It's like all of these don't even mean anymore. They don't even mean anything anymore. So Apple has been hit with a lawsuit for delaying and thereby false advertising Apple Intelligence features. According to the lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court in San Jose on Wednesday, Apple advertised Apple Intelligent features for the iPhone 16 lineup, despite knowing it could not actually provide the capabilities that it was advertising. Apple, go back to your old school advertising methods. What is this new shit that you guys are doing? It's terrible. Go back and look at like the 2000s or 90s or 80s Apple commercials. They were some of the best commercials. I mean, their 1984 movie commercial is like classic, infamous, one of the best launches of a new product of all time with that commercial. Anyways, through its pre-released marketing campaigns, Apple drove unprecedented excitement. I talked to everyone. No one cared about this. And set a reasonable consumer expectation that these AI-powered features would be available upon the iPhone 16's release in September. Of course, this is last September. The case comes just weeks after the company admitted it would need time to roll out parts of Apple Intelligence. It's going to take us longer than we thought to deliver on these features, and we anticipate rolling them out in the coming year. I think they need to, right? I mean, they advertised it. They literally have to build it now, I'd assume. I'm not sure how that works. The Siri features were rumored to have been pushed to 2026 first and then to 2027 after admitting to the delay earlier this month. Apple added a disclaimer on its website last week and appointed a new team lead for Apple Intelligence. Wow, someone got canned. There you go. There you go. That's what we got on the podcast this week. Got to get back to the office. Got to do some things here today. As always, please like, review, subscribe, leave a comment. Let us know what you disagree with, what you agree with. Share with a friend. Send us a message. Let us know how we did. We appreciate everyone's support. And as always, like I said, halfcoaststudios.com, where we're recording right now. If you need a recording studio or you just need help with editing, distribution, posting clips, etc., they can take care of you at halfcoaststudios.com. Best damn marketing company on the planet. Vi Media here in St. Louis. Go visit us, vi.media, or of course, look me up, Eric Kempf Brown, across the board. Send me a message. Thank you all. See you next week.
Hey there, St. Louis podcast listeners. We've got some exciting news from our friends over at Farmers Insurance of St. Louis, led by the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Lee of Farmers Insurance. If you're looking for a job or to own your own business under a brand that everyone and their cousin is familiar with, Mark Lee with Farmers Insurance of St. Louis is recruiting insurance agency owners here in St. Louis for their Farmers Insurance Mentorship Program.
And as many of you are aware, Garrett and I have owned quite a few successful and award-winning businesses over the years. And in a past life, one of those was a farmers insurance agency out of Chesterfield, Missouri.
Eric and I know firsthand how hard it is to start a business under a brand that no one has heard of and convince consumers and businesses to trust that you're an authority figure in your industry.
And as many of you know, we own an award-winning marketing firm, Vi Media, the one that Garrett was just discussing. And building that company's reputation literally took years. We're still building it to this day, and it's been 8 years in the making. However, with the Trusted Farmers Insurance Agency name on the building, we got started when we started our Farmers Insurance Agency. The trust was already built and has been for 96 years.
And if you can't do math, that means Farmers Insurance has been around since 1928. Luckily, you don't need to be a human calculator to get rich as an owner of your very own Farmers Insurance Agency.
Nope. All you have to do is reach out to the one and only Mark Lee, the leader of Farmers Insurance in the greater St. Louis metropolitan area.
That's right. So ensure he continues to sponsor our show and your favorite podcast, the St. Louis podcast, by quitting your job today and calling Mark Lee. I wouldn't even wait for him to answer your call. Call your boss now, quit, and become your very own business owner.
Visit insurancecareerstl.com. That is insurancecareerstl.com. Should we spell it out?
Yes. It would
INSURANCE. Career, CAREER, STL.com, insurancecareerstl.com. Go there now. Back to the podcast.
And wait, insurancecareerstl.com.
Back to the podcast.